The courthouse steps were overflowing long before sunrise, humming with reporters, supporters, doubters, and the simply curious who had braved the cold to witness what many were calling the most emotionally charged trial of the year. The tension was electric, pulsing through the crowd like a storm about to break. Everyone had gathered for one reason: a famous attorney, Eleanor Hart, had challenged the beloved civic leader John Kennedy in court, and the stakes were as high as the expectations. Kennedy, known for his tireless humanitarian work and his quiet, sincere way of speaking, stood accused of misusing charitable funds, an accusation that stunned the communities he had served for nearly a decade. Eleanor Hart, the attorney known for demolishing corruption wherever it hid, had taken the case with a reputation for pursuing truth with relentless precision. She was celebrated nationwide for her victories against powerful corporations, crooked politicians, and fraudulent executives. But this time her opponent wasn't the villain in a tailored suit. It was a man many believed incapable of wrongdoing, and that made the trial even more intense. Inside the courtroom, Eleanor entered first, her expression firm yet thoughtful, her briefcase heavy with evidence and responsibilities. She scanned the room the way a surgeon studies an operating table, knowing the slightest misstep could cost someone a life-changing outcome. Moments later, Kennedy walked in, shoulders straight but eyes carrying the weight of weeks of public scrutiny. He gave Eleanor a subtle nod, more a gesture of respect and acknowledgement of the battle they were about to fight. As the judge called for silence, the air grew stiff. It was the kind of quiet that grips the lungs. Eleanor opened the prosecution with sharp clarity, outlining every suspicious transaction, every missing receipt, every moment where funds had strayed from their documented purpose. She spoke of broken systems, vulnerable communities, and the danger of allowing even well-intentioned leaders to operate without accountability. Her voice carried strength, but beneath it was something else, an unease that only she could feel. There were inconsistencies, yes, but also moments where the facts didn't align neatly with malice. Still, her job was clear, and she did it with conviction. Then Kennedy approached the stand. Instead of polished rhetoric, he offered candid, sometimes trembling stories of the chaos following the hurricane that had destroyed thousands of homes. He described shelters collapsing from lack of funds, families stranded in broken neighborhoods, supplies delayed by bureaucratic red tape. "I didn't take money," he said, voice steady though his hands shook slightly. "I moved it to where it was needed, when it was needed. If that was a violation, then I violated a system that failed people who couldn't afford to wait." There was no defiance in his tone, only a kind of weary honesty that hung in the courtroom like a confession without guilt. Eleanor watched him closely, her years of experience telling her this was not a performance. She questioned him rigorously, but with each answer, the portrait of a man who chose humanity over protocol sharpened. Witnesses followed: the parents whose children received emergency medical care because of Kennedy's redirected funds, volunteers who saw him hauling boxes of supplies with his own two hands, auditors who admitted the irregularities seemed born of desperation rather than deception. Slowly, the narrative shifted. This was no embezzler, this was a man who had risked his career to help the most vulnerable. By the end of the trial, the courtroom no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a place where the messy, complicated truth was finally finding space to breathe. And when the judge returned with the verdict, the tension was suffocating. She paused, glanced at both sides, and announced that John Kennedy was found not guilty on all charges. The room erupted into whispers, gasps, and tears, some of relief, some of disbelief, all of emotional release. But the judge wasn't finished. She added that while Kennedy would face administrative consequences for bypassing regulations, he would also receive formal commendation for extraordinary service in a time of crisis. It was a verdict that balanced the law with empathy. After the gavel fell, Eleanor approached Kennedy with unexpected gentleness. "You fought for people," she said quietly. "I fought for the process. I think justice needed both of us." Kennedy shook her hand, gratitude and exhaustion mixing in his expression. "Maybe now we can fix what broke," he replied. Outside, the crowd swelled with cheers as cameras captured the handshake of two former adversaries united by something larger than victory. In the end, this wasn't a story about a courtroom clash. It was about courage, integrity, and the power of choosing what's right even when the world might misunderstand. It was a reminder that justice isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's a bridge built by two people on opposite sides, meeting in the middle for the sake of everyone watching.